Hi everyone, and welcome to the Latte Lounge. Now we all know that when you're a mum, no matter what age your kids are, you can often feel lonely, confused or worried. But being a mum of teenagers is a whole new ballgame. So today I'm really excited and looking forward to chatting to journalist, editor Lorraine Candy about her new book which just came out today. Lorraine has been writing about parenting in national newspapers and magazines for more than a decade, and she also co-hosts the chart-topping Postcards from Midlife podcast, which tackles parenting, adolescence too, and I was actually a guest with my father on it last year. So while you all join, I'm just going to say hello to a few of you and let Lorraine in very soon. Hi Kate, hi Lorraine. We're just going to wait a few minutes to let Lorraine Candy in case any of you missed my intro at the beginning. We're here to talk about Lorraine Candy's new book, which has just come out today. And Lorraine is a journalist and editor and has been writing about parenting in national newspapers and magazines for more than a decade now. Hi Lorraine, I can see you, but you just need to request to join. Just going to let Lorraine. Hello.
Ah.
How are you?
Well, there's always a moment, isn't there, when you just wonder whether it's going to work or not. And
oh, God,
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
I know, it's the worst. Oh, it's lovely to see you. So I was just doing a little intro before you joined, telling everyone that you've got this new book out today. I'm actually wearing pink to match it, just for you.
Yes. Thank you.
So this is Lorraine's new book, and congratulations. It's
Thank
called
you.
Mum, What's Wrong With You? 101 Things Only Mums of Teenage Girls Know. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we made it into the Amazon top 20 bestsellers on Sunday, so it's been quite. There's obviously a big need out there, I think, for this book, which is good to know. I think
Absolutely, it's amazing, and I'm not surprised. It's funny. Before we talk about the book, I was thinking we've got quite a lot in common. We're both 52.
Yeah.
We both got 4 kids. God help us.
You've got more boys, though, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we're literally the reverse. So I've got 3 boys and a girl. Have you got?
I've got three girls and a boy. Yes.
Oh, right. With the Brady bunch, we'll just.
Yeah.
So look, in your book, I'm going to quote that you've said, but basically we've both become accidental experts on women in midlife, talking about this whole sort of menopause and midlife parenting sandwich generation, which is great. But look, tell us a little bit first about your own family dynamics, sort of how old they are, girls, boys, dogs, hubby, parents, all that. Yeah.
Well, I'm based in London, and obviously I used to edit Elle magazine. I was the editor of Cosmo magazine. I was features editor at the Times, and I was editor of Sunday Times Style, and also present Postcards from Midlife. But I've got 4 children. They're Mabel 10, my son is 14, and my eldest 2, on whom the book is based really, are 17 and 18, and my eldest just gone to university, which she did last year at the end of lockdown. And obviously the book sort of starts with her and then ends with the day she leaves home, because we're in that empty nest place at the moment. I've been married for 22 years nearly to James, and we have a really annoying Welsh Terrier. So that's but I do make the point in the book, actually, a dog for teenagers is actually quite a good thing to have.
Absolutely. We also got a dog, I think, when it was about 4 years ago. I caved in. They'd been nagging since they were 6. The good thing about having the dog, I don't know if you agree, is that first of all, you're allowed to have a favourite child. So the dog is you're not allowed to have a favourite child, but the dog is my favourite child.
Well, they're a bit nicer to you sometimes.
Well, she never complains. But so look, in the book you talk, very sort of down to earth advice, expert tips for other mums who are facing life with teenage kids, and and I guess what I love about it in particular is you talk about the fact that their hormones are sort of colliding with our, sort of menopausal, perimenopausal hormones. So look, why did you decide to write it? Why was now the right time for you?
I think quite a lot of people had told me, like, when we chatted, when you came on the podcast with your dad, and we just talked about this it's just such a perfect storm for Gen X. We've got older parents we're looking after. We didn't really know, and that's what the Latte Lounge has done so brilliantly, anything about the perimenopause. I had no idea about it 4 years ago when I started to sort of seriously go through it. And at the same time, my kids were hitting their teenage years. And I just thought, they always say, don't they, write the book that you want to read. And I couldn't find any information all in one place anywhere that wasn't really kind of a proper sort of experts. Everything seemed to be for the very extreme situations, with kids in severe traumatic mental health situations, or women going through extraordinarily tough times in menopause. And I just couldn't find anything that was just for that sort of ordinary everyday life that we go through. That there are so many. I'd had the privilege of having a parenting column in both the Daily Mail and the Sunday Times for over a decade, and I've been able to talk to hundreds of experts and read all the books and get all the new research, and kind of been at the forefront in newsrooms as stuff was coming in on adolescent mental health. I worked with Shout as a volunteer to write a big piece. It's a crisis text line. So I had all this knowledge swirling around that I felt could help women in everyday life, that wasn't going to be this big sort of to-do list for us. It was really going to be maybe try this and maybe try that. And then I sort of pulled all the columns together and wove my own story through it, and then asked a couple of people to look at it, and they said, you know what, I've read it and it's really helpful already for me. So I just thought I'll put it out there, and then maybe what we'll do as a community is talk about it more, because there's quite a bit of shame, I think, around parenting teenagers, because it's uncharted territory, and the things they can do sometimes can make us feel a bit sad about what we feel like we might have done something wrong. We feel a bit of a failure, and if we don't talk about it and perhaps stop judging each other around it, then maybe the word will get out, and we'll all be a little bit, we'll all see it's not really, it's just what they're going through as much as what we're going through. So I just felt like that it should be good to put it all down. It seems it's kind of resonated, and people are interested in it, which has been really good. I just didn't expect it to do so well so quickly, but hopefully off the back of it, we can start a community of mums sharing our stories. And, because what works for one of my teenagers may not work for the other one. But if I've got 10 things in my head that I could possibly try that aren't dramatically changing my life, then our life could be more harmonious.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when they're babies and toddlers, I think a lot of us were sort of following all those self-help books of sort of naughty step and positive parenting with star charts. And then it's almost like, especially for us with 4 kids, you kind of forget about that. And and you're so busy looking at the younger 2, you sort of forgot the older 2 are suddenly getting older, and they actually need a different book. And
I think it's harder actually doing the teenage years, because when they're toddlers, they kind of just need someone to really love them and be there for them, and that can sort of be anyone who's around who might love them. But when they're teenagers, I don't know about your boys, but they just need you specifically, very specifically you. So if you can't be there, then that's a kind of slight flashpoint for them, isn't it? So for me, that it felt much harder having teenagers than having sleepless newborns. I mean, none of my kids slept till they were about 4, or having toddlers, or having a job and kids and all of it. This bit felt I was really shocked by the just the kind of emotional roller coaster of it. And you're always treading on hot coals, thinking, if I do it wrong, am I going to cause a terrible, terrible problem? And actually, I just wanted to relieve women of that pressure, that there isn't a right or a wrong way, that you're not fixing a problem, that they are kind of perfect as they are, but they're changing every single day. So you have to sort of be around that rather than trying to sort it out all the time. I think Gen X are real problem solvers as well. I think we go right in and think, I know you're telling me this, so this is how I'm going to help you out. And actually, sometimes they don't want you to help them out. They just want to hear what they're saying, which this skill of active listening, which I worked with the Shout volunteers, actually, and with a lot of therapists I talked to, adolescent mental health therapists. It's such a skill. It's quite a difficult skill, I think, for women who want to sort things out. But once you get it, just letting your teenagers tell you things rather than solving things is a real game changer, actually.
And I think that's right. It's funny. My mum always says, Katie, you're so involved in your kids' lives, and and I never really was. And I think the thing is, when they're little, you're so used to being able to fix their problems really easily. If it's a scratch on their knee or a cut, you stick a plaster on. I'm always looking for solutions. So, I feel the same with you, that with teenagers, I'm always desperate just to sort of sort it and fix it. And actually, I don't know, I'm sure you'll agree, but what I found the most frightening about this stage is, I think, the sort of the mobile phones, the social media, the mental health. And actually, you hear these horror stories, and you just kind of pray that you're doing it right, so your child doesn't become that kind of front page horror story. So, I mean, what have you found the hardest then, in terms of, I think
there's a lot of horror stories and panic headlines, and having worked behind the lines of a national newspaper, I know certain stories sell papers. So often the more negative a headline, the more horrific it is, the more clicks it gets. So that's a perpetuating thing. I think, as we've learned today, there's a report out from the American Psychiatry Association about self-harm, and saying that actually the indicators of self-harm start around the age of 4 and 5. So while we are drawn to the horror stories that this epidemic of self-harm is caused by social media, or it's caused by the digital world, or it's caused by, actually that's not true, and this research showed that isn't true. So we're in this giant panic all the time about it, when actually you can start really early building their resilience around this, and that the context of their lives is what's really, really important, rather than blaming everything on one thing. And it goes back to that wanting to fix it, doesn't it? Well, if I ban them from social media, that will fix it. Well, it won't, absolutely won't. And what you're not doing then is what they call looking under the bed. So you're blaming one thing and missing all the other stuff that's happening over here, which may be very simple. And also, I think as a society, we're not aware of how neurodiverse we all are. So we try to make us all do things in a certain way because that's our structure. But actually, some children are really, really different. I tell the story in the book of there's a wonderful book called The Dandelion and the Orchid, which is written by a psychiatrist, about the way everybody's mind is very different. And a mum brings in her four boys and says, these 3 are all right, and I've done exactly the same, but there's something wrong with this one. And it's not there's something wrong with this one, it's just this boy had his mind was developing in a different way. And so there are lots of different ways and different things that we can look at. I try not to get hysterically panicked by the big headlines. There's no research, and in 10 years of writing about this, and it may be coming because we're still looking into it, there's no smoking gun to say that social media is causing this epidemic of anxiety. And I've spoken to so many experts around this. It contributes, like absolutely everything else contributes, like bullying at school, like peer pressure, all these things contribute, and the mental stability of your child in the context of your home life. But when I talked to Susie Godson, who set up the Me Too app, of all the research they'd done with their thousands of young people that had, the things that caused the most problem were parental divorce. That seemed to be causing more anxiety than anything else. And the things that teenagers worried about were the things that we worried about as teenagers as well. So I think we should be mindful of stepping back from those terrible headlines and thinking, here's my teenager. What do I know about the teenager I live with? How can I work with him or her around what is affecting them or making them anxious? And there is a big reason, I think, to look at the word anxiety as well. It's a clinical diagnosis, anxiety, so it is a mental illness in forms. But actually, does your child have anxiety, or is your child sad, or is your child stressed, or is your child fearful? What's the other language we can use around it, so that we give them a different way of expressing things? And also, feeling stressed, fearful and sad is life. That's, if we keep trying to fix that and stop them feeling that, I think that's, again, a lot of the experts told me, step back from it and let them fix it themselves. All of this is very hard to do. But taking it in 15-minute chunks and working out what's working here, how can I step back and let them deal with it themselves, I think. And also the book is to remind mums to take care of themselves, which is, obviously what, a big message for the Latte Lounge community. Take care of yourself and you can take care of them. And also they see you taking care of yourself which is role modeling good behavior for them.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, in the book, you talk a lot about things like screen times, you know, taking phones away. And actually what I've found, and a lot of women have told us, is that in this sort of last year with lockdown, it almost forced families that didn't used to have sort of meal times together or a lot of time together to actually start to have a routine. So what I've found is that a lot of people say, oh, she's on her phone till 3 a.m. and she's been bullied. And what I've tried to do is, rather than say, give me your phone, you're not going on it, I've tried really hard throughout their childhood and more in the pandemic to actually have meal times, like you've said in your book, no phones at meal times. And what that does is, you know, that they're off their phone for an hour without saying no. And then that gives you sort of, especially as a big family, a chance to kind of talk and about other stuff that isn't, you know, I think, you know, when we were growing up, you left school at 4 o'clock. It didn't kind of encroach into your bedroom. I mean, so how, you know, you were talking about sort of various sort of issues and arguments over phones and screen times. How did you manage that?
Well, it was, so I have 4 children, and the 2 eldest ones, we were at the forefront. You know, they started without phones, and as they got older, phones came in, and smartphones, I think we should be clear about. So, and my 2 youngest children, it's always been in their lives. So what we did with the eldest 2, it was really, really hard. And I've written a piece for the Independent newspaper today, is we had to retrospectively set rules. And I think it probably caused the worst rift in our family of anything. They were very, very attached to their phones. So my rules were no phones in your room after 9 p.m. because I felt that their minds weren't strong enough or resilient enough to deal with anything they might be looking at overnight. That was would be a problem for them, which was hellish, absolutely hellish. And they made a terrible fuss, and they accused me of all sorts, and I wasn't my best parenting self. And then as they got older, we talked about when they could have their phones in the room at the weekends, because children need to learn to self-moderate. If you take all that control away, that's insane. How will they become resilient around? How will they learn what to look at and what not to look at? But with my 2 younger children, we said, if you would like a smartphone, these are the rules. And there will be consequences for breaking the rules. You know, you would have the phone taken away, the Wi-Fi will be turned off, we won't pay towards the bill, or, you know, your phone will be removed for a certain number of time, and you have to stick to those rules. But I found that a lot of parents found it hard to stick to the rules. They set rules they couldn't stick to. That, you know, my daughters would often say, I'm going to stay at so-and-so's house, because they knew they had unlimited phone access at someone else's house. And one of the mums was very cross with me and said, because you do this, we have to do this now, and it's caused terrible trouble in our house. There was so much judgment around it. And that, you know, you've got to live within what your family for, but you must always listen to what they want to do. So my girl said, look, if we negotiated having our phones till 10:30, 11 o'clock, please, but not being in our rooms on them, because it was being away from us that I felt was perhaps more damaging. I mean, it might, you know, if they were very fragile mentally, I'd have said no phones in the room after 7 p.m. I was just judging it based on what I felt their characters could deal with and what I knew about their peer group and what I knew about their schools. And I talked to the school about what they were doing and what they were advising, so that none of this was conflicting. But you have to set the boundaries. And I do think phones in the room at night that's when I think there is a possible risk to the mental health of your teenagers. Yeah. But if other stuff is happening around them that's diabolical, if they're being bullied at school, or they are fearful or anxious, or the exam pressure is too much, then you probably need to be quite firm about the phone rules. But on saying that, this is how they stay in touch with their friends. We were very relaxed during the pandemic about this, because this is how they stay in touch with their friends. And they, more than anything, they need their peers around them. I love to see my son playing FIFA with his mates. I love to see my 10-year-old playing Roblox with her friends and chatting to her friends and FaceTiming constantly, and, you know, her friends always being in the room with her. I think that's a really good thing, and I think we mustn't, as parents, demonize it because we don't understand it and we're fearful of it. It's not the phones, it's how you use the phones. That's the kind of way I always saw it. It's not what the phones are, but and also to create those moments of connection. Read and feed are the big overwhelming lessons I learned from the adolescent mental health people I talk to. Read them together with them when they're little, and as they get better, always try and have at least one evening a week or an afternoon a week when you eat together without phones as well. Yeah, but once they get to 18, I kind of think, once they get to 18, they're grown up. You've got to let them do what they do. And I would never underestimate how mine started to say, oh, I'm bored of it now, I'm going to put it in the cupboard away from me because they started to self-regulate. They are, I mean, your kids and my kids are the first generation with them. So the next generation, my 10-year-old will say, I'm a bit tired of that now, and put her phone down. So you never underestimate that they can regulate themselves. The teenage conscience is a really powerful thing, according to the psychologists. So allow it to kick in. It just might not kick in as quickly as yours because you're an adult and you've been practicing.
Absolutely. And it's funny because my youngest is 17, and then we've sort of got 19, 20, I always forget how old they are, 22, 24. And the older three, funnily enough, they're not really on their phones anymore because one's working, one's at uni, one sort of thinks, actually, I hate social media, it's terrible. And the other's busy sort of, training whatever he's doing to be, for his future. But so I think there is, someone's just said what happens after 18, that there is light at the end of the tunnel with phones. I think, as you say, they just kind of grow up. I mean, the thing that I don't know whether, you've had this, but the thing that scares me is the age of these sort of, you talk about pre-drinking, and I'd never heard of pre's until my daughter went off to uni, but the alcohol and the drugs and the vaping and the smoking, I'm not a prude, but it's come into their lives so much earlier than when we were teenagers. And that frightens me. I mean, have you sort of had that in your family where you're having to have those sort of conversations?
Yeah, you have to have those conversations because I think you have to say, this is how it makes me feel if you do those things. But you have to let them go. So you have to know that they are going to go to, particularly this summer now, I think they're going to be out and about because they've missed a summer of fun. They have to go to that. Hopefully you've made them robust enough that while they're experimenting, they have a sense of self-checking. But I just think you have to take a deep breath and think, we can do hard things. We're just going to have to deal with the fact that this must be happening. And I'm a really strong advocate of them having secrets, because I think having a private life while you form your new identity is really, really important. And if you're discovering all that, you're making yourself mentally stronger all of the time. But I think thinking that they will never try drugs, they will never try alcohol, they will never, it seems more prevalent to us, but actually is it? I don't know. I grew up in a very small Cornish village, but where I grew up, it was in the middle of Cornwall, which is one of the poorest parts of the country. It was really prevalent from a very young age, drugs and alcohol. So my experience is different from your experience. So it's very available. So, I kind of think that we just, it's down to your child and the circumstances around your child. And we can't get too fearful about it because we do know it's going to happen. One of the things that the addiction therapist I talked to said, it's not really what they're doing, it's the habit of doing it. So if they get into a habit of smoking weed every single night, if they get into a habit of going to a festival or out every single weekend, it's the habits that we need to be aware of. The habits are the vaping is more the habit of vaping. We don't really know enough about vaping yet, I think, and the potential effects. We should never say we think these things are safe or safer than. There's no escalating of one thing into the other. You have to, if you feel this way as a parent, you say that I don't want you to drink alcohol. I don't want you. And if you do, then obviously I'm going to deal with it but there will be consequences for that. And there are a lot of children. You can buy Xanax and things on Instagram. There's a huge. I mean, I watched a couple of videos on the website Vice about teenagers and drugs and fighting the life out of myself. But, we cannot control them all the time when they are outside. If their friends are doing this, then you've kind of got to tell them how you feel about it or how it would make you feel, but you can't stop them. I mean, it's, it's hard. It's tough being the parent of a teenager in this world. And you just hope their conscience kicks in. And often it takes 24 hours for their conscience to kick in. So when you suspect anything like you or in that situation, absolutely having a blasting row about it in the moment is really unhelpful. They just won't be able to process that. You kind of have to wait till the next day. An addiction counsellor said wait 24 hours when their brain is more settled and they're more able to take on what you're saying before you talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so look, I know you've written a book about teenage girls, but do you feel there is a massive difference between boys and girls? I mean, I guess for me, it's funny, I always imagine myself having girls. So when I had
I always imagined having boys.
Oh, really?
I just thought, well, I've edited like magazines for women, about women. You know, I've been steeped in women. I've been to all the fashions. I've done all of it. I know everything about women. You know, wouldn't it be refreshing to come home to a different gender to deal with? But I don't think, I mean, I think the adolescent changes are pretty across the board. You know, they're pretty similar. The thing I wanted to unpick in the book is the separating of girls from mums, because just as you're going through that terrible midlife unravelling, and you sort of wonder what your identity is, and your hormones are fluctuating all over the place, they're going through their identity forming and their hormones fluctuating all over the place. And it often, not every mum, but often in there trying to separate from the woman they're closest to, they can be really brutal. And I was really intrigued by why they were suddenly so awful to me when they'd been so adorable, and they were seemingly so adorable to everybody else, every other woman that they met. And actually, it is a kind of psychologically recognized thing. They're separating, they're forming their own identity, so they have to reject yours, and they kind of do it in a pretty brutal way, because they're testing the boundaries of your love for them. So I'm picking that bit is the personal piece of the book, but the rest of the book is really just about adolescent mental health, both genders.
Absolutely. And let's just very quickly, because we've only got about 5 minutes, and I want to just get to a few of the questions and comments. But you know, obviously I came on to Postcards from Midlife to talk about menopause and HRT and perimenopause and breast cancer with my father, and I loved talking to you about that. And I was quite obviously surprised to hear about your story and Trish's story, because you were sort of on the beginning, or you were just going through it. But how's that been for you? So how old were you when you noticed sort of these perimenopausal symptoms, and what did you sort of do to get some help?
Well, I was about 47, but it sort of started around 45, 46, 47. And I had, for the first time in my life, panic attacks. I had a panic attack on the doorstep on the way to work. It was, I couldn't breathe. I felt incredibly nauseous and very unwell. And at the same time, I was kind of forgetting everything, really properly felt that I might have Alzheimer's or something. My brain was just broken. And I thought, well, I've just done too much. I've had 4 kids. I've had a big career. I've broken my brain. It's not, you know, or there's some genetic thing I don't know about. And I'd gone to the doctor and been offered antidepressants, which I just thought, just doesn't feel like, there's no depression in my family. It's not something and I've done so much health reporting. I just don't think this is what's going on here. And I began to unpick it at the same time as Trish was going through a really similar thing. And we were thinking, what's happening here? We seem to be both physically and mentally very unwell. And I remember one day sitting on the sofa, and when I turned round, 6 hours had passed, I'd fallen asleep. I just had collapsed with exhaustion. And that was to do with just a diabolical drop in hormones. And I went again to the doctor and I said, I really think I need HRT. Again, I was offered antidepressants and referred to another doctor, a female doctor. I went again to her, and she gave me the wrong prescription. It was all over. By that point, I'd found Dr. Louise Newson, who said, I'm not sure why you're taking this. It's such you know, and she prescribed. And then within 6 weeks, I would say my life completely changed. I was back in the room again. I was able to function properly. And I think a lot of women go through that journey. And at the same time, you're trying to really deal with this teenage, you know, it's obviously my own choice to have so many children, but it was really, I just didn't want their teenage life to be awful because I wasn't on form for them at that point. And I think you found the same, didn't you? It was kind of relentless.
Yeah, and I think that's all, you know, and that's why I kind of do what I do, because nobody shines that spotlight on us, the woman in the middle. And I'm the same. I wanted to be kind of fun mum. I wanted to sit around, you know, with all their friends, kitchen table, late at night, laughing and chatting and sort of just being kind of, you know, obviously not their friend, but just sort of, you know, enjoying having loads of teenagers. Yeah, and I think until you realise what's wrong with yourself and get yourself back, you just, as you know, I was the same as you, sleeping all day. It's terrible, but you know, I mean, that's all I talk about these days. So, you know, I don't need to go. You know, you're obviously with the Davina documentary that came out. You know, it's, you know, it's great.
We're getting there.
We're getting there, but it's slow, but we're all, you know, we're all chipping away. So, look, just a couple of questions, and then I obviously want to sort of ask people where, you know, tell people where they can get the book. What I'm just going to read it out. One lady said, "How do you stop them wanting freedom? Where what I want, go where I want, and come home when I want."
Well, I think you have to negotiate with them and work out in your head the boundaries you want to set, and then there has to be consequences for those boundaries. But you have to also, I think, ask yourself, why do you want to set those boundaries? What is it in you that might... I had a question about piercings where a mum had said, I drew a line in the sand about a nose piercing, and she went and got her nose pierced, and that was, and what we unpicked was why was that the thing she wanted? You know, something that can be taken out, grown over. Why? Of course, her daughter was going to go and get a nose piercing. She'd been so vehement about it, and so we worked out where that was coming from in her mind and what was going on. So, why do you want to set those boundaries? Why do you say the freedom seems to be really upsetting for this lady? Why is them having freedom a problem? Why can't they take responsibility for their own decisions, even if they put themselves in risky places? Because they will. That is what they will do. So it's working out, and then, once the boundaries have been set, you have to have the consequences. And it's not about them, it's about you. You say, I have done this because I don't like it when. Because then if you start saying it's because you are this, you are a person I can't trust, you are a teenager who doesn't do things right, you are illogical, that's very difficult for a teenager to hear. And I'm not talking about being liberal or soft around them, but their brains are not developed properly. And you're shouting adult stuff at them when actually they can't take it in. So maybe you can set 2 boundaries, but the rest you probably are going to have to take a deep breath and let go.
Absolutely. There's a lady here. Well, my son is an apprentice and he's surrounded by lads on cocaine. I mean, that's obviously
it's difficult to deal with, isn't it? But you can't lock him in his bedroom. So he's going to be, if he's going to be surrounded by lads, it's going to be surrounded by lads. So it's, you know, it's his mental capacity to resist it, or his mental capacity to talk to you about it, his resilience around it, telling him what you would feel if he took it and how disapproving and disappointed you would be. So it's saying, this is what I feel, now make your decision, and hoping that sometimes their conscience kicks in, sometimes it doesn't. As I say, this is not a book for the extreme ends of mental health. You can't, you know, you have to test a lot of stuff with teenagers as well, and you're going to get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it?
And just lastly, you so your oldest, you know, it seems like yesterday obviously you were sort of sniffing her head and that lovely sort of after bath smell. How was it for you? You know, because I also had one, went to uni, sort of dropping. Yeah.
I just, honestly, I have to, the weirdest thing, on the morning she was going, and we tried to be very low key about it, I was violently sick. And I thought, oh, I fancy getting food poisoning on the day that she's leaving home. We've got to do this long drive. And then I just realised that it wasn't food poisoning at all. I was just so inside. I was so distressed about her going and losing her from the family. And it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was quite a stressful time for everybody. And I just remember thinking, I just thought this day would never, ever come. And it literally feels like 5 minutes ago I was pushing the buggy with her in it. I mean, you know this, it's the weirdest. You see them standing in the light outside their university halls, and you think when you walk back to the car, they're still going to be in the baby seat. It's the weirdest feeling. But you know what? You just have to sort of suck it up and realise that we can deal with tough stuff, because we've dealt with tough stuff. And you know, they come back. I mean, everyone said to me, "No, you come back." They come, but she's coming back this weekend. Actually, she's moving back in for the summer, so we are beside ourselves. Yeah, I mean, you still see your elder ones, don't you?
Well, so my oldest went to uni for 3 years, and then ironically moved back home for 3 years. So you think they've gone forever, and then they're not, and then they're back, and now I want you to know I'm sitting in my office, which is her bedroom. I've never had an office. She moved out during lockdown with her boyfriend. So I'm at that. You know, I thought I'd be bereft about her leaving home. And actually, it's great because she is now an adult friend. There's no more kind of arguments, and we can enjoy each other's companies. And so, you know.
She survived. She
survived. The boys are another story. And I'm going to have to write the sequel to your book about boys.
Boys are different. It's a very different journey with my son. God. I think.
Yes, but yeah, your poor son. Oh gosh! But look, this is the book, everyone, and where can everyone buy it?
So it's Fourth Estate Publisher. It's on Amazon, which seems to be. I've done a Kindle version and Audible. I read narrated the audiobook, and it's in all the bookshops. So if you've got a local bookshop, I've been in my local Primrose Hill one trying to support. They've been there 30 years. It's tough times for local bookshops, so maybe pop into a local bookshop and give them some support, and tag me and send me pictures of where you bought the books, because we're doing this once a week. I'm going to do a mum supporting mums Instagram where we do a live. I'm doing Emma Freud tonight. She'd been doing some parenting stuff as well. Next week I've got a therapist from America, Lisa DeMille. So we're going to just gather everyone together, and then just mums, and we must have you on, Katie, just mums talking about boys, actually, just mums telling their stories. So we all go, all right, that's okay. So I'm not alone here. Yeah. Other people are sitting at the bottom of the stairs thinking, what the hell was that about? So...
Absolutely. Oh, well, I look forward to seeing that. And you can follow Lorraine on Instagram at Lorraine Candy, and do listen to Postcards from Midlife. It's a brilliant podcast, and it's at Postcards from Midlife. So,
yeah, and listen to the one with your dad on, because that was a game changer. He is the reason Trish is on HRT. So, and I honestly, without him coming on, she would, because her mum died of breast cancer, she would have been going through the worst of times. And it is quite amazing what your dad's done, and the work you've done afterwards as a result, pulling this community together.
Thank you, Lorraine. I will tell him. He will be chuffed. But I will look. Good luck with good luck with the book, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.